Hey everybody, welcome back to the 6 round post-fight show with me, Zane Simon, and my co-host this week, Mookie Alexandre. We are coming to you just after the close of this UFC Busan card in South Korea, headlined by a featherweight bout between Chan Sung Jung and Frankie Edgar. And man, Frankie Edgar could not have picked a worse time to be a company man, I gotta say.
Yeah, he had a fight booked stateside, decides to fly out to South Korea on a couple weeks' notice to get absolutely blasted. And if we're being honest, that was the most lopsided beatdown of his entire career. And he's taken some beatings, but he's always managed to come back. Or even if he has lost, it's just been, valiant in defeat, this and that. But the Korean Zombie did whatever he wanted in that fight.
Yeah, I mean, I got to admit, I was willing to take a chance picking Edgar coming into this fight. I knew he'd be jumping into some counter shots, but I really needed to see him get knocked out again before I just thought, well, a big powerful counter puncher is just going to handle Frankie Edgar at this point in his career. But clearly, a big powerful counter puncher is just going to handle Frankie Edgar at this point in his career.
Yeah, and I guess one of the concerns now for Edgar is essentially he might have hit the point in his career where really any hard flush shot is going to hurt him. And
Yeah.
with the Korean Zombie, he hits really damn hard. There's no denying that. But as soon as he didn't get that first takedown, I figured this could be a long night because I picked Korean Zombie essentially for this reason. The longer this stays on the feet, even if we talk about Edgar's quickness and the fact that he doesn't look like a shot fighter or anything, but I just couldn't trust Edgar's chin to hold up against anybody who can crack really hard. And once he got hurt and knocked down first time, I thought it was going to be over a lot sooner than it actually was. It was kind of to Edgar's own detriment that he's so tough that instead of it being like a 90-second TKO, ended up being, 3 minutes and 18 seconds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, of course, the secondary story here for Edgar is that he lost 2 fights. Because now there's no way that Corey Sandhagen fight happens. So not only did he take the loss against Chan Sung Jung, but he lost his secondary booking as well.
Yeah, you could argue Sandhagen is kind of a loser in this situation because he loses out on an Edgar fight because Edgar lost, unless they want to rebook that matchup.
It's Sandhagen is a little bit of a loser in this fight. Mostly he kind of made himself the loser in this fight by going out campaigning ahead about how much damage it did to him to not get to fight Frankie Edgar. And it's like, man,
it happens all the time.
Yeah, and I realize that maybe there's a little honesty in that, but also a lot of fighting is about selling yourself as like, I'm the dominant narrative here. I can live without Frankie Edgar. I don't need this dude. He can fight whoever he wants. I'll go, be great against somebody else. Instead, when you're like, no, how could you not fight me? I needed to fight you. Like, it doesn't look good.
No, it doesn't. And yeah, I guess for Edgar, forget about the Sandhagen fight anytime soon. We can also really shut the doors on him getting some other title shot, because even if he does continue with his move to 135, it's not really just, it's a size disparity, this and that. Look at the top contenders at 135 and look at how many fighters can absolutely shut his lights off or at least badly damage him, whether it's Petr Yan or Cejudo, of course, Marlon Moraes. Heck, the Jose Aldo who fought last week probably beats Edgar a third time. I'd be pretty comfortable in saying that. And as much as we make fun of Cody Garbrandt because he just loves to eat right hands, Garbrandt's still got that type of power that can absolutely make Frankie's life miserable. So this is clearly the tail end of Frankie's career, and it's been a hell of a career, one of the most enjoyable that we've ever seen. But I always say that damage adds up at some point.
Oh, yeah.
All those times that, kind of like Diego Sanchez at a much lower level, all that damage starts to accumulate in those times where you think that you can come back and from getting badly hurt and win, those start turning into knockout losses. And now he's been knocked out, twice in over 4 or 5 fight span.
Yeah. Well, I mean, testament to Edgar, just because he did adjust as his career went on after the Maynard fights and into the last 5 years of his career especially, he's become much more focused on being a progressive wrestler who looks to build and attack carefully and fight from the outside. he's not the guy who fought Gray Maynard. He hasn't been fighting like the guy who fought those 2 fights against Gray Maynard for a while now. And the upside of that is that he's made it to 38 before it really feels like he's now just a significant step off the elite. And that's a long, long time to be able to go for a guy who started 14 years ago. So
yeah. I mean, it's not like Edgar. I think we can write Edgar off as the very, very top of whatever division he decides to compete at. But he can still be a gatekeeper sort of deal, or fight the lower end of the top 10 or top 15, and still get off some wins there before the wheels really start to fall off and he starts losing to those guys. And that's also dependent on how much longer he wants to continue fighting. But it took until almost the end of the decade for him to finally look like a 38-year-old, I guess you could say.
So here's a question I got to ask then, because it's not like, and I'm going to say this, and it's going to sound cruel, but it's also unfortunately true, because I want Max Holloway to have been a much bigger star than he ever was. But it's not like Max Holloway is a huge star for the UFC. Do you think, would you rather see Alexander Volkanovski versus Holloway 2 or Volkanovski versus Chan Sung Jung?
Oh, Korean Zombie. No question about it. I'm not sure how much longer I want to see Holloway at 145, to be honest. I can't imagine those weight cuts are still good for him, especially since he was having a hard time on short notice making 155 during that Khabib bout that got canceled last year. And also, I thought that Volkanovski pretty clearly beat Holloway. So it wasn't a blowout or anything, but it just feels kind of crummy to make Volkanovski win that fight twice. And with the Korean Zombie, the only crummy thing for him, the only knock on him over the last couple of fights is that he lost at the literal last second against Yair Rodriguez. And if he didn't lose that fight, we'd be talking about him on a 4-fight winning streak. But, surrounding that, Moicano and Edgar are 2 very good wins. And it's not like this division is filled with guys who are ready for a title shot. Like, I don't really think Zabit is necessarily ready for a title shot. He hasn't even shown the ability to pace himself properly for a 5-round fight, whereas the Zombies had no issue going into 5-round fights before. And, he's just so damn exciting. He's much more sellable at this point. I mean, the name sells itself. They don't even call him Chan Sung Jung. We call him that, but he's always advertised as the Korean Zombie.
It's true. No, that's kind of how I feel too, is that even if taking away this idea that somehow Volkanovski stands to make more money against Max Holloway, which, like I say, I don't actually necessarily believe that Holloway draws enough money to even get Volkanovski pay-per-view points. Leaving that behind, I'm just kind of excited to watch a super violent Chan Sung Jung get a title shot again right now. Like, that feels like a fun idea. It feels like a fight that I want to see. And Volkanovski Holloway, it was a great, masterful, top flight bout. But what it showed was in every arena at the point that it mattered in the cage that day, Volkanovski was the better fighter. And that really does feel less like the kind of thing that needs an immediate rematch than maybe, than like Demetrius Johnson when he lost to Henry Cejudo, and I was like, I don't know about that. I could see that fight again. Of course, we never did, but this just feels like Holloway lost, and we can move on. He can fight his way back. He's still a great fighter. He can take 2 fights, win them, and be back in a title shot again.
Exactly. He's beaten so much of the division anyway. And here's one of the things that Rogan loves to say is that Holloway is the greatest featherweight of all time, blah, blah, blah. Now, you could make a case for it. You can make a case either side, but has he been a dominant champion? Because he only has 3 defenses. Yeah. Aldo in the rematch, Brian Ortega, Frankie Edgar, and a list. So I'd rather that Holloway just take some time off, and then he can fight whomever for whether it's Yair or Zabit or who else is available. And if he wins that, then sure, you can do a Volkanovski fight again. Or, if Korean Zombie beats Volkanovski in the next fight, you can do Zombie versus Holloway. But he's not miles away. I don't think we are clamoring. I don't think the public is necessarily clamoring to see Holloway Volkanovski too. But with the way that the Zombie has gotten these highlight reel finishes, it's hard to deny him a title shot when the only other realistic option is Zabit. And I guess you could say Yair Rodriguez has got a tiny case for it because he has beaten Zombie with that miracle knockout, and he beat Jeremy Stevens. But again, those cardio issues I think are pretty warranted as far as something to watch in a 5-round fight.
Yeah, Zabit even has more hype than Yair right now. There's kind of like that point where Yair got cut from the UFC and got brought back. And then this whole thing with like the eye poke thing over Stevens and then the rematch and all that. I think, there's not really anybody who's like clamor on the Yair train right now. It doesn't feel like,
Yeah, because when he came back after that cut and then he's back, he hadn't fought after the Edgar beatdown. So you're looking at a miracle KO at the last second, the weird no contest with Stevens, and then beating him in the rematch. After dominating him and then kind of holding on late to win a decision. Is that really enough for a title shot relative to what anybody else has done? So I give it to Zombie, man. I think, and also we remember what happened the last time Zombie got a title shot, and it was on short notice. It was to fill in for Pettis, and he was going to probably lose to Aldo anyway, but just in an unfortunate ending, he hurt his shoulder, and that was the end of it. So just sentimentally, I'd love to see one more title shot for Korean Zombie, and just the way he's fought, he on a merit base, he's got a really strong case.
Yep. I will say this though: if for some reason the UFC decided that they didn't want to give the title shot to either Holloway or Chan Sung Jung, if they get injured, the timing's wrong, something else, and the UFC's like, okay, Zabit, Yair, they're gonna get one of them's gonna get the shot. They're ready on the day when we need them. I would love to see Max Holloway versus Chan Sung Jung. Like, that is actually, of all the potential fights out there that could combine, that's kind of the one I most want to see.
Oh yeah, that's pure chaos. Really, any Zombie fight is chaos, but this in particular is different because I can actually envision Holloway actually getting knocked out. Yeah,
he gets hit enough, especially early and late in fights, that really powerful counterpuncher. Because that was the big thing with the Poirier fight too, was that Poirier's ability to deliver power continuously while moving out of the pocket hurt Holloway often enough, and that it kept him from building any momentum. Even when Holloway would have these stretches of great success, and you're like, oh, here it comes, Max Holloway, he's putting it all together now. And then he would just get crushed by a shot and have to reset and restart everything. Chan Sung Jung, he's got that potential, and he's been proving it now for a few fights now. So that's the kind of thing, like, I'm just more excited for Chan Sung Jung to fight somebody than anybody else right now. So that's kind of the good argument for him getting a title shot coming out of this.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, let's move on then to the light heavyweight co-main event. And a fight that I think we all kind of hoped would be more electrifying. It was... I don't even want to argue that Oezdemir didn't win it. I'm a little surprised he got the win, I'll say. He did more damage, clearly. What he did to Rakic's leg is absolutely the most damaging thing to happen in that fight. And he won the last round. But he was afterward calling for fight rematches against Anthony Smith and with Dominic Reyes, and it's kind of like, I don't know that kind of fight actually makes me feel like, oh yeah, no, I got to see Oezdemir get back one of his losses now, and he's right there in title contention. Yeah, this is sort of like, well, I guess he closed the door on Rakić for the moment, but that's about it.
Yeah, and well, I stayed spoiler-free watching the main card.
Me too.
When I went on to ESPN Plus, I see the length of the video. I see I kind of guessed that it had gone the distance, so I was fearing the worst, that this was actually a bad fight. And it wasn't a bad fight, but
No.
it could have been a bit better. There was no denying that Oezdemir was kicking 7 shades of shit out of Rakic's legs.
Yeah.
And that was probably the most effective offense of the entire fight. But I thought Rakić landed the far superior head strikes. Oezdemir was coming up short on a lot of his combinations, throwing that right hand left hook. Rakić was controlling distance and dodging them pretty consistently. I was surprised that Rakić actually ended up on the losing end of the decision. I don't think it's a robbery, but it did not necessarily feel like Oezdemir convincingly won that fight. In other words, I feel like there's a stronger case for Rakić getting the nod than Oezdemir, but it's light heavyweights. Just when you think that there's a light heavyweight with promise, then reality sets in, and then they get some sort of setback. Like, this isn't a damaging defeat for Rakić by any means, not the same way that it was for Johnny Walker against Corey Anderson.
No.
But I will credit Oezdemir that he has improved significantly from a couple of years ago, where it felt like he was just there to throw bombs and then hope he knocks a dude out in a minute and a half or something like that. There's a lot more process to his game.
The fact that he came out and put out more volume and better offense and won the final round of this fight,
yes,
is a big testament to how much he's improved his pacing and cardio and his control of bouts from the guy who used to just kind of bomb his way into the clinch and then panic fight, where he would either then knock somebody out instantly or get gassed so bad that he would just get taken apart.
Yeah, and the takedown defense. Now, Rakić is an improving wrestler. He's hardly one of the better wrestlers that Oezdemir's faced, but his takedown defense held up extremely well. I think the only round that Rakić clearly won was the first. So then it comes down to the second and the third. And I guess these judges certainly valued the leg kicks, because by the time round 2 came along, Rakic's lead leg turned into a knot. Just one big knot.
No, I mean, and that's why, I can't argue. I'm not going to argue against Oezdemir winning, because I always like to see damage given principle scoring criteria. And the clearest evidence of damage in this fight was Rakic's leg. There's just no other way around it. So, fine by me. You give Oezdemir a round for that. He won the third. But yeah, like I said, he's calling out Smith and Reyes. It's just I'd kind of like to maybe see Oezdemir fight Jacare, maybe.
Yeah, it depends on whether or not Jacare wants to stick around at 205. He really should at this stage of his career.
Yeah.
As bad as the Blachowicz fight was, don't kill yourself to cut to 185 anymore.
Oezdemir is not Jan Blachowicz. He's not going to stay on his back foot and just jab Jacare into oblivion like Jan did. It would be a fun mix of a fight, and if Jacare can't win that fight, then he's not going to make it at 205, and that's fine. But it seems like it would be maybe a big enough name for Oezdemir to want the fight, rather than just trying to fight the number 2 and number 3 fighters in the division only.
I mean, the options for him at 205 are not particularly plentiful in terms of meaningful fights. Santos is out for a while. I don't know why Cormier is still ranked at 205. I mean, it's time to give up the ghost on him ever getting back down there. If he wants the Anthony Smith rematch, whatever, but I would probably still favor Smith, and he's sidelined for another couple months.
Does this kind of mediocre win really warrant you you should go get one back against one of the top ranked fighters in the division? You should get that chance again to win a fight you clearly lost last time.
Yeah, and again, it's is anybody clamoring for the Oezdemir Smith rematch?
No.
Exactly. And they're not clamoring for a Reyes rematch either, because Reyes has got a title shot anyway. Anderson and Blachowicz are rematching each other. And speaking of fights that nobody asked for, Gustafsson is retired or unretired, whatever the case. I mean, I don't really want to see Gustafsson fight top guys at this stage of his career.
If Gus wants to come back, then sure, he can fight Volkan Oezdemir. I will say that. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, it can headline a European show easily.
Exactly. It's a big name, and Oezdemir's winning, and Gustafsson is it's an interesting marquee matchup. I just am saying Oezdemir needs to get another win before we start talking about him getting the kind of fights that would put him right back in title contention.
Yeah, and then the other option is Glover Teixeira, and that's not bad. If they don't make Teixeira versus Smith, then Oezdemir Teixeira's got some intrigue.
Yeah, that's not a bad bout either.
No, not at all.
I don't see it as wildly different than Jacare at this point. Like Jacare, Glover Teixeira, splitting hairs for me at that point.
Yeah, man, light heavyweight is just depressing. At least there's some hope at heavyweight, but at light heavyweight, it just feels blah, not Blachowicz, but
yeah, there's still a lot of chaff in the middle of that division. I'm liking a lot of the fighters that are coming on the rise right now, but there's still like just this kind of middle core of old dudes that are just crafty enough and tough enough to take apart all the exciting newcomers. But we'll see. We'll see where that goes down the road. And as we said, for Rakić, I honestly like both of us feeling like he might have won this fight. It's a loss. It kind of sucks. I hope his leg's not too damaged. But in the long run, it's probably not gonna stall out his ability to rise towards title contender status in the future.
Yeah, it's more of a learning experience type of fight. He didn't fight poorly or anything. It's just a close fight, and 3 different sets of judges, and it may have had a different outcome.
Yep. That brings us to a featherweight bout. Charles Jourdain, Air Jourdain, and Doo Ho Choi. And man, what a spoiler performance from Charles Jourdain.
Yeah, I mean, Jourdain was pretty wild and entertaining in TKO, so I figured this would be a fun fight, but I didn't actually envision him winning.
No, he seemed like, he's a fighter who's always been able to beat people just with pace and aggression. Not a one-shot power kind of guy, and he's always been wild. So it seems like, they've given Doo Ho Choi a wild action fighter who can't stop him with one shot, and will give him lots of opportunities to land his own shots. Should be a setup win for Doo Ho Choi. Instead, it's a huge win for Jourdain.
It was looking good for Choi, though, at the start. Yeah. I mean, he hurt Jourdain multiple times. I think he caught him with a big left hand, and then he dropped him with a small right hand, short right hand along the side. But as that round progressed, I think the first round was one of the craziest rounds of the year. This is a dessert fight of the night. But Jourdain, I think he hurt him with a spinning elbow, kind of stopped him in his tracks, and then he hurt him with another strike that I can't recall, like shortly thereafter. And then he was winning much of round 2, leading up to the knockout. And poor Doo Ho Choi, the Korean Superboy, just burst onto the scene in the UFC, and we think, man, this is an all-action fighter and potential contender. And coming off a long layoff, and I think he deferred his military service. So
yeah,
he hasn't done it yet.
He didn't. They said actually on broadcast he didn't defer it. He was unable to I don't know if they were unable to place him in service yet, or if he had a delay in his application or something. But they said that he hasn't started it yet, and so he can't leave Korea. But he's in the process of getting into service, but he can't leave Korea until at all. I mean, he's waiting to go in. So the downside for Doo Ho Choi is he loses this big fight at home. The upside for fans is that even if he'd won, he wasn't going to fight for 2 years anyway. Probably he can't. That was the only reason he's on this Korea card, is because it had to be a fight in his home country.
Yeah, and it's his 3rd straight loss. And let's be real, his defense has not gotten any better. And there's no getting around that. Every time he rushes forward, it is the perfect opportunity to counter. And that's what Jourdain ended up doing to knock him out. But there's reason to be concerned about the damage he's taken through these 3 fights, because he had that epic war with Cub Swanson, and then Jeremy Stephens shut his lights out. And now Jourdain, who's definitely steps below Stephens and Swanson relative to what they were at their respective stages of their career, ends up being one of his worst losses of his career out of the 4. And we won't see him for a while, and that sucks.
It does. It's a rough way to go out for Doo Ho Choi, and I mean, I was talking about this with Eric Perez last night, El Goyito, who was, one of the hottest top Jackson Wink prospects 6 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, coming into the UFC, and got into some contract disagreement with the UFC. Even after it was after a string of wins. It wasn't like he had a couple losses, but it wasn't like he wasn't having success. Then went to Combate, and then ended up with a contract disagreement with Combate as well, and now ended up in Bellator and just got smoked by a relative unknown action journeyman fighter out of Hawaii. And even with everything lined up perfectly for a lot of fighters, you see the athleticism, the big camp, all the experience, the technical pieces. It's like, oh, this kid's going to be the future. This sport is really rough on people.
Yeah, it can turn on you in an instant. So, on the rough side for Choi, the positive side for Jordan is certainly he got his big win, the biggest of his career, and he also got a $50,000 bonus, so he can move out of his parents' basement, which is what he said in the post-fight interview. So if you thought we would go like multiple cards in a row without a fighter who was on the lower end of the pay bracket saying, please give me extra money, and depressing everybody with the state of fighter pay, tough luck. It's just going to happen all the time. But I thought parents' basements is where bloggers live, not fighters.
That's right. Colby Covington would be so ashamed to hear that. Anyway, big win for Jordan. I'm glad he got the check. It was a fun fight. He needed the money, clearly. And, now he can go get an apartment of his own. That brings us to a light heavyweight bout. Jung, Mike Rodriguez, and beautiful KO for Jung. And after a really rough back and forth debut, a fun debut, but the kind of debut where you're like, are either of these guys going to do anything? This is much more the kind of performance that makes you kind of think, Jung might be a hot prospect at light heavyweight.
Yeah, that was a sharp-looking knockout there. That looked like a really lazy jab that Rodriguez was throwing out there, and it was countered beautifully, hard right hand, and he just collapsed in a heap, done in 64 seconds. I guess Rodriguez's slow nickname is really fitting. If there was ever an accurate nickname. So,
man.
Contender series guys, it's been a mixed bag. But one of the consistent things about the contender series signings who have not necessarily panned out is that defense is not a top priority for them. So it just feels like Dana signs whoever gets a lot of cool finishes and then just disregards everything else that makes a good prospect. So, the John Allen fight, you could forgive him a bit because Allen ended up failing his drug tests. But for this fight, he just got clobbered, and there's not much more to say other than cool
Allen
knockouts.
Came out, put a grind on him. Clark came out, put a grind on him. Those felt very, defensible. Jung, you were like, well, these two guys, they both like to stand out in open space. They both love to strike. They're both 6'4", and Rodriguez has a 4-inch reach advantage and is a southpaw. This should really favor him. And Jung just slipped. He got the inside foot position off of Rodriguez's jab, and that counter right hand he landed just melted him.
Yeah, and well-timed stoppage, too. Like, we didn't need to see anything beyond the ground and pound afterwards. So what is that, 2 wins now for Jung in the UFC? Because I believe he beat Ibragimov previously. So, yeah, he looks like somebody who's got some promise, or at least somebody who can help fill up cards when the UFC goes to that region on a regular basis.
Yeah, well, and it's 6'4", and seeing the kind of beating he survived against Ibragimov, he's big enough, he's tough enough, and his striking is smooth enough that he's got a lot of the baseline features of a guy who can rise a long way in that division that is not necessarily built off of toughness. A lot of great light heavyweights are just really good athlete. They're Johnny Walker, great athlete, super high flying, super fast, not the best chin in the world. So for Jun Park to be as big as he is and as tough as he is, he might be able to make something out of that.
Yeah, and he's only 26 years old. He's
Yeah.
a month younger than me, actually. So maybe we have another light heavyweight worth watching, even if he doesn't necessarily have like top 5 aspirations. But I certainly was impressed with his performance.
Anthony Smith and Thiago Santos are top 5 light heavyweights. What are top 5 aspirations in that division? You know?
Yeah, I think just being alive and having a temperature that's body temperature that's in the general area of 98.6 degrees, you've got a good shot.
Being big and being powerful is just what it's all about at light heavyweight. So as long as he's got those two things, and he does, we'll see. You know, everything else on top of that is just kind of gravy.
Yeah.
That brings it to a middleweight bout, Jun Park and Marc-Andre Barriault, and I was super happy to see this because Jun Park is exactly the kind of fighter I love to watch, and after his debut loss to Anthony Hernandez, I was just like, he's just going to be too small and too pillow-fisted to make any headway in this division at all. But he went out there and really just kind of chewed Barriault up.
Yeah, out-wrestled him, outstruck him. In fact, the wrestling has been a problem for Barriault throughout his UFC career. And I liked his level changes. Everything was well-timed. Barriault kind of sort of made a comeback in round 3, but that felt more like Park was content to hold on and coast, if you will, to get a decision win anyway, just not get stopped.
Yeah.
And it was a pretty, I guess you could say, a workman-like showing. And Barriault, I think puts him at 0-3 in the UFC. And the same weaknesses that were there from the Andrew Sanchez fight were still there for the Jun Park fight. And it doesn't look like he has really the skills more than anything to hang in the UFC. And given his series of split decisions in the regional scene, you had some reason to be concerned that he was UFC caliber.
I kind of assumed he'd be big enough and powerful enough to just kind of get Park out of there, but not being able to do that, then you really are kind of, you're looking at the fights Barriault's had, his 3 losses, and it's just kind of like, well, you don't, you've got some power, but there's none of his boxing skill is not deep enough to deliver it at this level. And if he can't deliver that power, there's not a lot of other skills backing it up.
Yeah, so. It feels like the regional scene is more his speed. Like that Sanchez fight, from what I remember, is Sanchez once again, as we've known him to do a lot of times, he was badly fading in the 3rd round. And Barriault was kind of content to lose 29-28.
Yep.
So with Park, this wasn't the same thing, but again, he never really made a big push to win this fight.
Yeah. Good win for Park. I'm glad to see it. I'm glad he's hanging around. I love busy pocket counterpunchers. They're super fun to watch. And so I'm really happy to see him get this win. Brings us to a bantamweight bout, Kyung Ho Kang beating Lu Ping Yan, and I kind of feel like that's all that needs to be said about this. I don't know. It kind of sucks for Kyung Ho Kang that now at like 6-2 and 1 no contest in his UFC career, that he's just not delivering any of the kind of performances that are going to keep him from having to fight all of bantamweight's lowest, most uninteresting newcomers.
Yeah, this fight wasn't good.
Yeah.
It was. I'm just going to stop short of calling it lay and pray. Actually, I'm not going to stop short. It was lay and pray. And I think part of the reason one judge gave Lu Ping won the split decision is that the 3rd round he definitely won. He was doing he had the far more damaging offense, throwing strikes off of his back. And then round 2, I guess, was close enough that you could maybe shade it to Lu ever so slightly. He clearly lost the 1st round. Lu had real problems with his takedown defense, but this was just a fight completely starved of real serious offense. And for Kang, yeah, he is, as you said, 6-2 over his last 8 fights, but it feels like it's just totally unremarkable.
Yeah. It's too bad. There's some nice technical pieces to his game, but the grappling, his ability to win scrambles seems to have been stalling out lately. It happened against Brandon Davis too. He really won the last 2 rounds of that fight, just kind of stalling Davis out from top control. And it happened here against Lu Pingyan. And it's kind of like, well, if you're not going to be a fun scrambling grappler, you're not. He's just not that. He's not that thrilling a fighter. He's well-rounded and meh. Let's move on. Ciryl Gane, Tanner Boser, a much more exciting win, a much more interesting fight, and Gane looks like actually legit heavyweight prospect. The once-in-a-blue moon guy who comes around, and you're like, wow, he's big enough, he's tough enough, he's fast and skilled, and he hits hard. He could actually be a title challenger in the next 2 years.
Yeah, and first of all, I did not know his last name was actually Gane and not Gane. I would have figured he's French. That has to be.
Yeah.
I guess there's no accent mark above the E. So
yeah, so fair enough. Ciryl Gane.
Yeah, but he's not going to be gone from this division anytime soon if he keeps fighting like this.
Show's over. No. Just cut it. Cut. Done.
Oh, we are keeping this in. You can't cut gold like this. But seriously, this felt like it was set up to be a showcase fight for him against Tanner Boser, who's not a scrub by any means, but it just felt like there was a big disadvantage for Boser, both athletically and in terms of skill set. Gane he's very light on his feet. He picks his shots well, and when he does land, he's pretty damn accurate. And Boser really didn't have much to offer him. And from what we've seen through 3 fights, we've kind of seen him be hyped up as Francis Ngannou's training partner, and the fact that he's got some big striking skills of his own, but he's shown himself to be very well-rounded, and I'm excited to see his progression over this next couple of years because he's only 29 years old.
Yeah, which in a heavyweight, he's basically a child in that division. And yeah, I mean, the thing with heavyweight too, though, is like, yeah, this was set up. He was the biggest favorite on the card. This is set up for him to deliver. The trick with being a heavyweight prospect, though, is actually winning the fights that you're supposed to win. Like, that is such a high bar for that division to set that seeing somebody do it, I can't help be excited. And because Boser, for the fact that he's really, credit to him, he came in as a much more aggressive fighter than I've ever seen him be before. He actually looked like he wanted to win this fight. But he's otherwise always made his name regionally just by being incredibly tough and very careful about picking his shots and not getting hurt. And that's it. And that's actually kind of like to see a fighter like Gane just be able to go out there and once again stick to a game whereby you landing your shots, you're not overstepping yourself, you're not putting yourself out to lose a fight you're supposed to win. Like, we've seen Derek Lewis do a lot worse version of that, where he's getting hurt all the time and getting himself way out of position on shots, and just the fact that he sticks around for 3 to 5 rounds every time means he's won way, way, way more times than he's lost. Gane, he's showing that he can be a pretty decisive force in this division if he can keep it up.
Yeah, and I liked his body work.
Yep.
His work off the counter was really well done. Boser, the thing with Gane is we've not seen a whole lot out of him he's not presented a lot of openings for his previous 3 opponents where you can think, oh man, Gane looks quite vulnerable. He's giving guys opportunities to let him back into the fight. And, these are not your even top 15 heavyweights, but still, you can't always look at it from an opponent level standpoint. You got to look at the skill set as well. And with Gane, he looks very refined for somebody who's only got a handful of MMA fights.
He's got a real Stipe Miocic vibe to him, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Which, of course, means that the next thing that's going to happen to him is get knocked out by Stefan Struve.
Yes, but it's the inevitability, that heavyweights and light heavyweights with promise are ultimately found out to be not good.
Yeah. He could easily fight Augusto Sakai or Sergey Pavlovich next at this point. But the fight I'd actually kind of like to see him in right now is against Ben Rothwell.
Yeah, I mean, Rothwell, somebody needs to punish Rothwell for all that blatant cheating he did in the last fight and then still come away with a win. So maybe Ciryl Gane is the guy. Just give him an extra large cup.
Yeah, that's right. Get Joe Rogan to get on the phone with the Diamond MMA or the Diamond Steel Cup people and get a special order made for Gane.
Yeah, triple up on that cup.
All right, that brings us to a featherweight bout. Sungwoo Choi, Suman Mokhtarian, and UFC needs to stop signing guys out of that Mokhtarian fight team. I don't know.
Yeah, I was about to ask, like, what on earth are any of these Australian top team dudes doing in the UFC? None of them is any good.
No, I don't. I think it's just that they've been really good at artfully can crushing regionally to get records that are like 10-0 or 9-1 and stuff like that. And then every time the UFC has to come to Asia Oceania, they're like, we need somebody, and they've got this guy's got a good record. We'll sign him. And credit to Mokhtarian, he throws wild moving forward, and he caught Sungwoo Choi at one point and hurt him. And then he tried to pour it on late in that fight. And he went for that takedown, and Sungwoo Choi just picked him up and bodied him onto the mat. And it's just Sungwoo Choi shouldn't be doing that. He doesn't look like somebody who should be doing that to anybody. Mokhtarian he's lucky that he kind of had the success he did, because even the judges one judge gave Sungwoo Choi 2 10-8 rounds after losing a point in the first for a fence grab.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the second 10-8, but I guess the way that Choi finished the last half minute of that fight, dropping elbows and hammer fist, it kind of gave off the appearance that the fight was close to being stopped. I would not have been totally against that fight being a standing stoppage in the second round, where it felt like Mokhtarian was taking a billion shots. Choi headhunted a little bit too much, and that might have cost him the finish, but he had him badly hurt, and round 2 was just as lopsided as it could possibly be. And Mokhtarian complained about something as he was, retreating.
His mouthpiece dropped out, and the ref didn't notice, and Mokhtarian thought that he was better off complaining to the ref than stopping himself from taking an extreme beating in the moment.
Yeah, well, last I checked, the referee's not supposed to intervene in the middle of an assault to pick up the mouthpiece and put it back in there. So Choi, the point deduction was a bit odd, because I swear I only heard one warning. So I'm not used to this where people actually get punished for multiple fence grabs.
It's very un-MMA.
Yeah, very un-MMA. But Choi was beating him up in the clinch, beat him up at distance, all those spinning strikes, those hard elbows, and the combination punching. And then on the ground, it was just a total mismatch. Mokhtarian, no doubt tough, but him and his brother, and who's the other Australian top team fighter that I'm thinking of?
There's Alex Gorgees and Nadia Kassem.
Yeah, Nadia Kassem. And Kassem looks like she has no business being on a UFC roster either. So, yeah, Mokhtarian was just totally overwhelmed in there. Made for a fun fight, but the closest thing Mokhtarian had to meaningful success is, when he did hurt Choi in the third round, and then more or less threw himself into side control. Yeah.
It was just an ugly fight, and a good win for Sungwoo Choi, though, who looks like another fun, kind of low defense, high offense Korean fighter. That brings us to a lightweight bout, Omar Morales versus Dong-Hyun Ma. And I was saying this in the vivisection all week, and it's still true. I'm not sure that there's a mildly athletic lightweight that I would pick Dong-Hyun Ma to beat right now. Something in his style, that Polo Reyes fight just absolutely broke him as a fighter, and this fight felt like just much more of that.
Yeah, the only really good showing I can think of out of Dong-Hyun Ma in a win ever since the Polo Reyes fight was beating the ghost of Takanori Gomi. And in this fight, it really felt like he kind of flipped from all-out aggression to he's waiting and not providing much in the way of meaningful strikes. And, this wasn't a great fight to watch, but Morales was the more technical fighter, pretty much did what he had to do on the ground. And then the fight really turned in his favor for good with that spinning kick that knocked Ma down. But Ma this was probably the end of his run in the UFC. Like the Holtzman fight, from what I remember, was pretty wild, but that was mostly him just getting beaten up.
Yeah, Devontae Smith, Holtzman, Morales, and I mean, even back to Damian Brown, like his success has been marked by him trying to be as patient and and to not put himself in danger as much as possible, to just be like very calm, very wary of engaging, and keep light strikes out there against Brown. He was fast enough to just keep out of Brown's way the whole time and barely won that fight. But against Devontae Smith and Scott Holtzman, it's kind of like, well, you're patiently waiting until one of these dudes melts you with something. And that's what happened. And same thing with Morales. It's just like you're patiently waiting until Morales can find that spinning hook kick to your jaw. Like you can't be as defensively void as Dong-Hyun Ma is, and as offensively void.
Yeah, it seems like his offense works best when there's complete chaos, but his defense isn't good in a patient setting or a chaotic setting.
Yeah.
So again, as you said, against anybody who's got at least decent baseline level athleticism, he's not going to be able to win. So he might also, given that the UFC has been cutting quite a few fighters lately, he might find himself on the chopping block too. Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised if this is his last bout in the UFC. Brings us to a flyweight bout. Alexandre Pantoja versus Matt Schnell. And I'm actually I'm sure it's happened. There have been a few, but it's been a minute since I've seen a fighter look that unhappy in a knockout.
Yeah, maybe because he got cracked a couple of times.
That was my initial thought at the time. I was like watching this, and Pantoja knocks him out, and he's just like, oh man. And I'm just like, oh, maybe he just didn't feel like he fought a good fight. But it turns out that he and Schnell are just really good friends. So one of those weird pairings that you would never have guessed, but just felt really bad about beating up his friend.
See, I skipped pretty much all the post-fight interviews, so I never actually heard that bit. But when I saw that Schnell was willing to stand and trade the first 15 seconds, I thought to myself, this is the exact fight Matt Schnell should not be having. Yeah. Because his chin, even though it's been better over this winning streak, he's been getting knocked out by Hector Sandoval, and I believe from his guard, and then knocked out cold by Rob Font at bantamweight. He does not have the durability to go toe-to-toe with Pantoja, and it's not like he's known as some vicious knockout artist either. So even though he cracked Pantoja a couple of times, most of those exchanges were going Pantoja's way. And even when it went to the ground, I think Schnell pulled guard one time, and then Pantoja backed out of it. But when it went back to the ground, I think off a caught kick or something, Pantoja almost punched his head through the canvas with some vicious single shot ground and pound. It just felt like a matter of time before Schnell ended up getting stopped. And it ended up being a really good finish for Pantoja. Got him to faceplant as he was coming forward. Body shot, opened up the head for a clean KO.
Yeah. No, it was a great fight. Now, I will even say, Schnell standing, I thought he looked pretty good early in this fight. He's the more technical striker between the two, and that clearly made a pretty good difference early on, where they were trading shots, and I think Pantoja was getting a lot of the worst of it. But especially when Schnell ended up on his back, maybe he solved his chin issue standing, but there's just something about him laying on his back that's just especially knockout prone as well, because that seemed to be when Pantoja really honestly hurt him bad, was those shots that he landed while postured over Schnell's guard. And yeah, that one where he just nailed him and you could just hear Schnell's head bounce off the canvas. That was where you were like, okay, this fight's gonna, Schnell's not gonna win this. There's no way now.
Yeah, so with Cejudo stripped of the belt, he relinquished the belt. I mean, this is the same as saying you can't fire me, I quit. But,
yeah.
Cejudo no longer the flyweight champion. Pantoja's in a weird spot because he clearly lost to Figueiredo and was thoroughly outclassed 2 fights ago.
Yep.
So he's got to be hoping that Benavidez actually wins that fight.
Yeah, if Benavidez wins, Pantoja. I mean, so there's several options. Several ways the UFC could go. If Pantoja wants to fight again soon, then I'd kind of just rather see the UFC throw caution to the wind and book Pantoja versus Formiga. And the caution there is that if Formiga wins and Benavidez wins, then you have a fight that makes no sense. And if Pantoja wins and Figueiredo wins, then you have a fight that makes no sense. But otherwise, the UFC can just wait for, make everybody wait until Figueiredo versus Benavidez is wrapped up, and then if Benavidez wins, Pantoja gets the next title shot, and if Figueiredo wins, Formiga gets the next title shot.
Yeah, like this fight's only 2 months away, so it's not like there's going to be some lengthy wait or anything.
True.
They can still have Pantoja and whoever else, wait until early summer or late spring to figure out what their next fight will be. But I'd like to see Pantoja get a title shot because I've been pretty high on his improvements since his early UFC days. I'm also not totally against him in a rematch with this version of Brandon Moreno, because the Moreno who fought Kai Kara France, that's, I think,
the only thing I would say in Pantoja's defense against that fight would be that he has beat Moreno twice now.
Did he beat him on The Ultimate Fighter?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So yeah, there's another problem there. That's right. I don't really have my Ultimate Fighter records up to speed, but yeah, flyweight is still a division with 15 people, so it's not like there's this laundry list of contenders. But Pantoja is clearly one of them. And look, he's a fun fighter, and he's steadily gotten things to work in terms of mixing up his striking and his grappling, and he's really a strong scrambler. I think that's one of his bigger strengths before we've even seen him getting these knockouts. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this flyweight division plays out over the next few months now that Cejudo is not champion and Benavidez has a chance to become champion. Formiga is the wrench here because he just lost to Benavidez, and he's been somebody who's been wanting a title shot for the longest while and hasn't gotten it. And
he also beat Figueiredo.
Yes, he does. So he did, rather. Boy, I just wish they'd sign some more flyweights.
Yeah, that's the real thing that's true here, is that when looking at the potential for future title challengers, Benavidez versus Figueiredo is a great vacant title fight, but there is no actual clear challenger to face them next. That's the real truth.
Yeah, there's like Rogerio Bontorin. I swear, has he even fought in the UFC yet? Because he's number 6.
He's fought twice. He's 2-0.
Twice. I think one of those might have been that Holly and Paiva fight.
Yeah, he.
Yeah, I can't remember totally, but yeah,
I'm looking it up real quick because I can't. His wins have been not bad, but they're not. He beat Magomed Babulatov by split decision in his debut, a fight that I kind of thought Babulatov actually might have won, and then his next fight was the Holly and Paiva fight where he got a cut. He cut him open in the first round, and they stopped it.
Oh yeah, that's the nasty cut. So yeah, again, options aren't plentiful, and it's a wait and see game. But Pantoja looked good. That was a fun fight, as fun as advertised. Why the hell that was that deep on the prelims, I don't know. Other than the UFC doesn't care about the flyweight division that much.
No, they never have, and it appears that they continue to somehow think that not signing anybody and not putting their fights in places where anybody can see them is going to build them a division they can market. I don't know. Like it seems like they just delayed cutting everybody only to now they're probably going to make that exact same decision in 6 months from now. They're just going to cut everybody again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's some of this feels like Benavidez has been a company man. This is like his one last shot at a title, and then they'll figure out whether they want to axe this division or not. Yeah.
That brings us to a bantamweight fight that also should not have been buried this deep on the prelims of a card in the middle of the night that nobody saw. A bantamweight fight between Hani Barcelos and Said Nurmagomedov. And this was a pretty fantastic fight and a good, strong win for Barcelos, who honestly he should be ranked and he should be fighting better opposition right now.
Yeah, Barcelos' career, I won't say it's a waste, but they're wasting some of these fights. Like Kurt Holloway was a good introductory fight, and then these last three have been since he drops a bantamweight. Chris Gutierrez, Carlos Washington, and Said Nurmagomedov. Said's a good fighter in his own right, but Barcelos should be fighting ranked guys at this point.
Yeah, he's 32. He's been doing this for a while now. He was a former RFA champ. He's a power puncher with a good wrestling and grappling game and nuanced boxing and nuanced defensive boxing in the pocket. Like, he's super tough. He's just a really good, well-rounded fighter in the prime of his career, and he needs to be like, I want to see him fight Cody Stamann right now. I want to see him fight Rob Font right now. Hell, I'd watch him fight Pedro Munoz right now. Like, these are the kind of fights that he should be in. Said Nurmagomedov is a great prospect, but like, just give Barcelos a chance to actually face some good competition. Give him a chance to fight on a main card, show off a little.
Yeah, fully agree. I mean, this was a high-paced fight. The first round I thought went to Nurmagomedov, and then I think one of the big adjustments is Said was going to that spinning well a little too much, and Barcelos caught onto it and was countering him. He was killing him with leg kicks, and it's because of the going to that spinning well too many times. Barcelos started going to his wrestling and his grappling, and it essentially muted a lot of Nurmagomedov's offense as the fight progressed. And the countering of Barcelos was also on points over those last few minutes. So a really deserved win, and there's not much more to add here other than get Barcelos a step up in competition. It feels like bantamweight is a division that is filled with so much talent, but it is stalled out so often towards the upper end because of either inactive champions or champions who want to go fight in other weight classes or champions who are injured.
Yeah, and just it's also the ranking panel's feeling that like you have to replace somebody. That's the only way to be ranked. So you got, like you just have all these fighters who have put together, who are on like a string of losses right now. And it's just like, or who just get hyped and instantly ranked out of hype, where it's like Casey Kenny's 2-0. And yeah, he's got a couple, they were good wins, but like, does beating
Manny Bermudez and I think Ray Borg.
Like a flyweight and a guy that the UFC immediately cut after his most recent loss, does that really mean that Casey Kenny should be a ranked bantamweight right now? Did running, dang it, I'm forgetting names right now, but did running Ricky Simone up into the rankings make sense? Like, they've got options here, and they're just kind of not picking the actual most talented fighters. They're just picking the guys that seem like they're the most fun or flashy. So, I don't know. It sucks to see Barcelos getting shoved into this very, like, and it seems to happen to Brazilians too. It's like this very Rani Yahya, Rafael Assunção, like you're gonna have to win 8 million fights for anybody to care about you kind of role. And this is even his first decision in the UFC, so you can't even argue that it's because he's boring or something.
No, and this was a good fight. He's an entertaining, very well-rounded fighter. So move him up the ladder, man. It's way overdue.
Yeah. That brings us to a women's strawweight bout. Amanda Lemos, Miranda Granger. Two fighters. I'm not actually sure that these women shouldn't both be at flyweight. Granger at 5'7". Like, she actually looks like she carries strawweight decently for how stick-thin she is. But Lemos still looked a little hollow-eyed in the cage, despite picking up a super impressive, dominating win.
Yeah, it feels like 125 is a better weight class for her. Now, I remember her fighting at bantamweight against Leslie Smith, and I think that was one of Leslie's last wins before she was let go by the UFC. But that choke just totally caught me off guard. When Joe Rogan or other analysts, we've noticed Cormier and Bisping and Cruz now get into the act. When it looks like a submission is locked in deep, I know, okay, yeah, so the submission's actually not locked in. They'll get out of it. But this one, I never really thought that the choke was sunk in, and then
Mm-mm.
Granger was out like a light in like 3 seconds. Her legs stiffened first, then her arms, and that was a wrap. And that's a strong choke.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is, like I said, Lemos looked a little hollow-eyed in the cage. I think she's a pretty strong, thickly muscled woman who really just like cut a lot of weight for this fight, and that power was pretty evident pretty quickly.
Yeah, and she's a finisher. That's
Yep.
7-1, but 5 knockouts, and then that's a second submission win of her career, and both of those submissions have been by choke. And for Danger Granger from Everett, Washington, not too far away from where I used to live, that's her first loss. But there's no shame in losing to somebody like Lemos, who looks like she's got some good upside to her game, but she looked like she was physically inferior even before the submission, because she just got ragdolled to the mat in an instant.
Yeah. Lemos looks pretty powerful. If she can keep making the cut happen, and if she, improves it and doesn't look quite so, dehydrated in the cage, then she could be a real power player at strawweight. Otherwise, I might not be that shocked if we see, sometime in her next 2 or 3 fights, her missing weight by like 4 or 5 pounds and getting forced up to 125.
Yeah, that seems inevitable. And really, if we're looking for a division that needs any sort of beefing up, it's flyweight, not strawweight.
Well, kind of. Strawweight, flyweight's surprisingly big. That's where the UFC's been signing everybody. So they don't have the elite fighters at the top, but they do have like 45 fighters in the division already.
Wow, I would not have figured that.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of surprising. They a lot of women flocked to it from 125 and from 115. That brings us finally to a bantamweight bout. Haile Alateng spoiling the long-time coming return to action from Ryan Benoit. He's from Texas, I always forget. Ryan Benoit, who also made his bantamweight return after a few years at flyweight, and he looked okay, but he had a clear answer. This was a fight that both men won entirely whenever they were on the front foot.
Mm-hmm.
The moment either one of them took a step backward, their opponent immediately started winning. And Benoit was killing it with those body kicks. But he just wasn't as tough as Haile Alateng. That was really what it was. Alateng just kind of rode through all the damage and then just kept pouring offense on. And was able to do enough wrestling and just be tough enough over the last half of the fight to pick up the win. Rough outing for Benoit.
Yeah, Benoit, he was really owning round one. Those body kicks, the good combinations upstairs, and it's clear that Alateng was hurt. But in the second round, Alateng was landing a lot of right hands on Benoit. And if he had like 5 more seconds, he might have even knocked him out, because he badly buzzed him towards the end of the round. The third round was a bit interesting because, this is why it was a split decision. It felt like Alateng didn't want to take the risk of getting cracked again. So he sold out for takedowns like nobody's business. And he had some control, but not a lot of damage. And then in the final minute, Benoit was landing several hammer fists and stuffing those shots better. So you could have given it to Benoit for better offense, but I'm not too fussed with the decision. I think Alateng did enough. And yeah, as you mentioned, when one was on the front foot, they didn't have an answer for the other. And for Alateng, that fight really turned in the second round. And it also felt like Benoit was his offense and his willingness to throw started to wane a bit as the fight progressed.
Yeah, that's kind of what I mean by tougher. Is it not like Alateng didn't get hurt by Benoit's shot, or Benoit didn't get hurt by Alateng's shots, but it's just that Alateng clearly he pushed through bad spots to try to find more ways to win, where Benoit just looked like he became increasingly frustrated.
Yeah, I think that was that's a good point. It was kind of like Benoit was steadily running out of ideas, and he never even went back to the body kicks a whole lot either. And I felt like that was his best success, instead of trying to force the boxing, because he was starting to lose those exchanges more often.
It is interesting, though, because especially just off of significant strikes, Benoit's got a pretty good argument to be made that he should feel hard done by the judges. He outlanded Alatang 19-12 in round 1, and in a round that most people would have thought he won anyway. Pretty inarguable round for him. And then he outlanded him 23-7 with significant strikes in round 3. But he got taken down 4 times. So, definitely in that round. So, definitely a tough round to score. And a round, like, it really does lead to an argumentative split, you know?
Yeah, but, it was a really good fight, and it kind of summed up the whole card. It was a really entertaining bout, very entertaining morning of fights, very few bad moments.
A great card to catch after it had already happened without having seen any of the results.
Yeah. Well, I watched the first 2 fights live because it was 11 o'clock in the evening, and then I just, conked out, headed to bed, and then watched the rest.
I woke up to Pantoja versus Schnell, which was a great wake-up call. All right. Well, on that note, as we say at the end of this, I think we're both more excited to see Chan Sung Jung in title contention than just about any other featherweight right now. So the UFC, off of this win, they should be making that fight if they can. Holloway, I'm happy to watch Holloway in any fight. I do not. His loss to Alexander Volkanovski did not make me feel like I saw the most entertaining Max Holloway I want to see. So watching a rematch of it does not feel like the most entertaining Max Holloway fight I can watch. But this fight presented a good potential title challenger, and I kind of feel like the UFC should be willing to jump on it.
Yeah, I mean, Korean Zombie's his striking, those uppercuts are lethal, and the timing and placement of his shots, they're really difficult for most of that division to handle. And let's face it, Holloway, even in the Edgar fight, didn't look that great. He clearly won it, but I'm wondering, 1-2 in 2019, he might need some time off to heal whatever is ailing him and get recharged for 2020. And we can just see something different. We want to see different matchups, and it's not some sort of offense.
I just want to see him against fighters that are less neutralizing.
Yep.
That's really it, is that, like, I'll watch him against Zabit. I'll watch him against Yair. I'll watch him against Chan Sung Jung at some point. Like, I want to see Holloway in some more action fights before having lost his title, turn around back to fight a super neutralizing Alexander Volkanovski. It's just like, okay, I'm not going to see a new challenge for Volkanovski, and I'm not going to see the most fun Max Holloway fight I can watch. So it really doesn't have a lot of immediate draw for me. Anyway, thanks everyone for tuning in. You can find me on Twitter at TheZaneTime. You can find Mookie on Twitter at Mookie Alexandre. Thanks, and we'll be back next time for UFC 246, McGregor vs. Cerrone, coming at you on January 18th.